Thank you, Reverend. The House will come to order. Please join Representative McCormick in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Shee will please call the roll.
Representatives Mabile, Bacon, oh there she is. Baisley, Benavides. Okay, don't see Benavides. She's excused. Oh hi, Burnett. Did you see Burnett? Sorry. Okay. Bird. Hi. Bockenfeld. Basenecker. Bradfield. Caravale. Carver. Catlin. Cutter. Doherty. Duran.
Here.
Esgar. Exum. Froelich. Geithner. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray. Hanks. Here. Herod. Holtorf. Oh. Hooten. She's here? Okay. Judah. I know I saw her too. She's back there. Kennedy. Representative Kennedy. Okay. Excused. Kip. Larson. Lindsay. Montine. Luck. Lynch. McCluskey. McCormick. McKean. McLaughlin. Michelson Janae is excused today. Mullica. Neville. Ortiz. Harold. Pelton. Pico. Ransom. Here. Oh, okay. Rich. Ricks. Is it? Oh, yeah, his excuse. Roberts. Sandridge. Sirota. Snyder. Soper. I have not seen him yet. Soper's excused. Yep. Sullivan. No. Representative Sullivan. Use Tipper. Titone. Valdez A. Valdez D. Van Beber. Van Winkle. I don't see him. Weissman. Will. Williams. Woodrow. Woog. Young. Mr. Speaker.
With 61 present, 4 excused, we have a quorum. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Journal of Friday, February 11th, be approved as corrected by our chief clerk.
Thank you, Representative McCormick. Members, you have heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
It was the prettiest no of the session. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. I have one quick one. Representative Weissman will replace Representative Gray on Finance Committee for today only. Mr. Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you very, very much. If it is Monday, it might be February 14th. If it's February 14th, it might be a big day in my town. If it's a big day in my town, it might be Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I know you're really sad about the weekend coming to an end, but a very bright spot is today is Monday. And if it's Monday, it's finance. Today, we will be meeting at 1:30 in our normal committee room, House Committee Room 112. We will be hearing House Bill 22-1034 and House Bill 22-1055. You'll see I've changed the order of when we'll be hearing our bills in committee. So 1034 will be heard first, 1055 will be second. We'll see you there.
Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just like to keep coming down here. Today, the Agriculture, Livestock, and Water Committee will be meeting at 1:30 in room 107. We'll be hearing two bills, HB 22-1016 and Senate Bill 22-017. See you then.
Representative Tatone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, Joint Technology Committee, we will be making our recommendations to the JBC on tech projects. So if you're interested in what we're going to recommend, that will be the meeting you want to hear. 8 o'clock, room 352. Be there for the tech stuff. Thank you.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of House, State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs, we're hearing 5 bills at 1:30 today. We're going to be meeting in the Old State Library for House Bill 1086, 1044, 1078, 1084, and 1085.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members, happy Valentine's Day. On my desk, I've got a whole bucket full of handmade chocolates made by Miss Barb Cardell, who's a friend of mine out of Boulder. She made these specifically for the legislature to say thank you. So, homemade chocolates for Valentine's Day sitting on my desk.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Any other announcements and or introductions? Seen none. The next order of business is third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Bill 1036.
House Bill 1036 by Representative Snyder and Soper, also Senator Lee, concerning a requirement that certain real estate commission-approved forms specify whether the real estate transaction on which a form is based concerns a land surveyor's inspection of the real estate.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1036 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1036 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Hanks votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1036 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Gregorio, please read the title of the House Bill. Mr. Schiebel, that's $5.
Ooh.
$5 fine. Mr. Schiebel. It's a $5 fine for me. All right. This is going to get expensive. Mr. Shebel, sorry about that. Please read the title of the House Bill 1035.
House Bill 1035 by Representatives Young and Bradfield, also Senators Janal and Rankin, concerning modernization of the Older Coloradans Act.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1035 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1035 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Hanks votes no. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 53 aye votes, 9 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1035 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1041.
House Bill 1041 by Representatives Basenecker and Larson, also Senator Janal, concerning restrictions on making public the personal information of protected persons at risk of threats.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1041 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1041 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Hanks votes no. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 52 aye votes, 10 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1041 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Ortiz, Duran, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1071.
House Bill 1071 by Representative Woodrow, also Senator Rodriguez, concerning available relief for plaintiffs who prevail in a class action under the Colorado Consumer Protection Act.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1071 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1071 on third reading and final passage. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, esteemed colleagues in this chamber. Mr. Speaker, is there a conflict of interest for a bill sponsor who does class action litigation and who sponsors this type of legislation?
It is up to each member. If you believe there's a conflict, if you have a conflict, there is a rule, 21C, that you can take that excuses you from that vote. You can work with OLS staff, but that's up to each individual, and that is up to each of you to do on your own. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1071 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Hanks votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 34 aye votes, 28 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1071 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1087.
House Bill 1087 by Representatives Hooton and Pico, also Senator Story and Liston, concerning Special District Director retirement benefits and in connection therewith, excluding a Special District Director from becoming eligible for membership in the Public Employees Retirement Association due to the Director's service as a Director.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1087 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1087 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Hanks votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 61 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 3 excused, House Bill 1087 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the House Bill 1097.
House Bill 1097 by Representative Valdez D., also Senator Simpson, concerning the authority of a Board of County Commissioners to file an application for dissolution of a special district with the Special District's Board of Director and in connection therewith allowing a Board of County Commissioners to consent to dissolution by court order without an election of a special district with no outstanding financial obligations or debt.
Woo!
It's pretty good. I don't know if it was worthy of a clap, but it was pretty good. Majority Leader Escar.
Considering you call him the wrong name, give him a little more credit than that.
Ah, fair enough.
Mr. Speaker, I'm being interrupted.
No, let's make the motion, and then if you want to discuss it, just make sure it pertains to the bill. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1097 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1097 on third reading, final passage. Seeing discussion, Minority Leader McKean.
So this is concerning the authority of a Board of County Commissioners to file an application for dissolution of a special district with Special District's Board of Directors and in connection therewith allowing Board of County Commissioners to consent to dissolution by court order without election of special districts with no outstanding financial obligations or debt. He did a better job. He did a better job. And that's what we're clapping for. We're clapping because...
That's good.
And then you find him for like going to change his name. And now it's going to be George Gregorio. How is that going to work?
It's a fair point, Mr. Minority Leader. Mr. Shebel, you know that we love you. You have big shoes to fill, and I thought we were trying to move away from a society where everyone gets a ribbon all the time, and we just wanted to make sure that we keep the bar high enough, because there's going to be bills with really long titles, and when you don't take a breath, you're going to get huge applause, and we just want to make sure that you feel the glory when it is most appropriate. With that, Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request to take a Rule 21C on this.
So approved. Representative Soper will be excused for this vote. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Hanks votes no. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 4 excused, House Bill 1097 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. That brings us to general order, second reading of bills. Representative Froelich. Members, you have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Froelich will take the chair.
Mr. Shebo, Mr. Shebo, Mr. Shebo. The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee reports are printed in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader. The coat rule is relaxed. Mr. Shebo, please read the title. Is that right? Please read the title of House Bill 22-1088.
House Bill 1088 by Representatives Valdez D. and Will, also Senators Liston and Lee, concerning peace officer status for certain Department of Revenue employees.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1088. And there's no committee report.
You have heard the motion. Can't remember what I do now.
Please proceed.
To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an honor to serve with you on this Valentine's Day. With that, we move House Bill 1088. This is a good bill. This was brought to us by the Department of Revenue. This bill requires employees of the Division of Motor Vehicles Investigations Unit and Criminal Tax Agents to be certified police peace officers. There are 7 employees in each of these sections for a total of 14 that will become certified as a result of this bill. With that, my good friend and colleague from Newcastle is prime sponsor with me, and I'll hand it over to him.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you, and also happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. So this bill adds 2 types of employees, as he mentioned, the motor vehicle criminal investigators and the tax enforcement officers, to the list of peace officers that requires them to be certified by the Peace Officer Standard and Training Post Board. It also exempts the department from timing requirements on legislation. But this bill cuts red tape and bureaucracy, and as my co-prime said, it only involves 14 officers, 7 on each side. And this is a good bill. It's about officer safety. These guys, they're doing some pretty good investigations. It's also keeping them from impacting our rural law enforcement officers, because they're not post-certified, so if they have to get an affidavit for a search warrant or any of that type of thing, they have to go to our local law enforcement to get them to do that. Maybe to do a search warrant or whatever, get an affidavit signed by a judge. So these will be post-certified officers, much needed. Great bill, vote yes.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to also add in, this is about safety and efficiency for investigations and investigators too. With that, I ask your support on House Bill 1088.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was a no vote on committee because this is one of those bills that the old adage of before you move a fence, you better find out why it was thoughtfully and carefully put there in the first place. This bill not only, I'm all for cutting red tape and eliminating bureaucracy and things like that. I don't view this as a bill that necessarily does that. It actually moves two boundaries. It eliminates two separation of powers that I think are actually very key. The first being state and local government. Right now, if a tax investigator wants to go out to Ray, Colorado or Parachute, Colorado or something like that and get someone arrested, they must work with that local sheriff's office or that local police department before they can go kick down a door or just simply arrest someone. I think that's actually a very key thing that we have had since the beginning of the state of Colorado, and I would like to keep it that way. Also, we're eliminating a border. We're eliminating a separation of power between tax investigations and law enforcement, which actually I think are two very different things. Right now, if a tax investigator, when they're auditing you or they're investigating you, that's a very intimidating process already. Your financial well-being and your family's financial future is on the line in that process. That's already intimidating enough. To add in a law enforcement and a badge and a gun into that situation, that is a very, very intimidating thing. We're not that far away from the IRS a couple years ago actually targeting people based on their political affiliations. And what we're talking about here largely is the IRS of the state of Colorado. So those are some of the reasons why I was a no vote in committee and plan to be a no vote on the floor. Thank you.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I am actually up here, and I don't really actually come up here and do this very often, but I'm actually up here in opposition of this bill today. And there's a couple of things I wanted to, one of the questions I actually had for the bill sponsors that I think is important for this body to know is why do these particular employees need this level of authorization and of authority to be peace officers? On top of that, the types of investigators we're talking about are motor vehicle criminal investigators and criminal tax enforcement special agents. Members, I sat in Judiciary the first year that this came forward in 2020. This bill came forward then, and they filed their report in 2019, the Department of Revenue, and they have within 2 years of filing their report to actually put forth legislation. What this bill is doing is actually eliminating the need in order to have move forward legislation within that 2 years, because obviously it is beyond the 2 years. And so I do question, what does that report or what does that analysis look like now that we are in 2022, and when the initial report came through was before COVID, and we all know how much things have changed since then. Additionally, the last thing I want to say, and similar to my colleague who was up here speaking earlier, as to different positions staying in their own lanes, members, I think many of you know I used to be a social caseworker. And if you don't know what that means, is that you go out to people's homes to investigate child abuse and neglect. And sometimes those investigations can be dangerous, and you don't know what you're walking into. I can tell you that there is not a social caseworker that is post-certified. And for a very good reason, because they are there to conduct a certain particular job. And if they do require some assistance, as we heard earlier, if law enforcement is needed, you can make that request to accompany you because you are there to investigate a particular issue, just as these other positions that are being requested to be post-certified. So members, I will not be supporting this bill, and hope that you all take a good look at this bill.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem Benavides.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, I heard this bill a couple of years ago in Judiciary, and I did support the bill. And I still support the idea of making these two types of investigators post-certified. What I don't like about this bill is that the requirements for the two-year reports are through Judiciary. They have to be sent to the Judiciary Committee, and when we alter it, any requirements that are set by the Judiciary Committees, that should go back to Judiciary, not to another committee. That said, I think the reports were filed. There was a timing issue with regard to COVID, but it wasn't that they overlooked filing it. And members, when I said this in Judiciary Committee, and I'll say it here as well, I may be the only one in here that have ever utilized a special investigator for tax. I worked at IRS, and one of the positions I held was as a revenue officer doing tax enforcement. And it doesn't mean that every revenue officer is post-certified, or not even post-certified, or is law enforcement, because they're not. I never was, I never carried a gun, I never did any of those things. But if I felt there was a risk, part of my job was to let our Criminal Investigations Division know that I needed to be accompanied. I recall seizing 2 large vans of equipment from a known tax protester. We did it without telling them in advance, which was the normal scenario at the advice of the criminal investigators. And when I had to go give them notice that I had seized their property, I did take criminal investigator agents with me. These people are trained. They were there, and part of it is a disincentive for people that may want to do something. We went, they introduced themselves, nothing happened, we gave the notice, and we left. And that is most situations. But there are times, like I recall seizing a business that had weapons within the business that I couldn't handle and shouldn't have handled as a revenue officer. So I utilized those special investigators. I stopped the seizure, called them, had them come to the site, and they took care of that aspect. So it wasn't left to the individual revenue officer, tax collector. I think it's important, and you should know this is a long time, it's not brand new, at least at the federal level. And all of the criminal investigators for IRS at the federal level they are backup to like Secret Service and other federal agencies. Remember when 9/11 occurred? It was those special investigators from IRS that stepped into the role of the air marshals because they do have that training. We have post-certified people that are wildlife inspectors, or not investigators, which I never quite understood that, but if they come upon somebody, say was poaching or something else, you don't have time to call law enforcement, and you don't expect it at that time. And this is a very limited number of individuals, and most of the time they are not armed. They're working in their office, doing their investigative work for tax fraud or title fraud. And I think it's important that we protect our state employees when something occurs that they could see in advance could be problematic. I know it was useful to me and others as revenue officers for the federal government, and I think it's the same analysis for the state. So I urge a yes vote.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the question was raised why we needed this bill, and I'll continue to say because this is about safety. Safety to our state employees, safety to our individuals going to a location that we know that has a reputation, whether it be criminal tax or motor vehicle fraud, and how important this is for our state employees to continue to make sure that safety and efficiency and making sure that they go home at the end of the day to their families. So this is a good bill. Appreciate it, and vote yes on House Bill 1088.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree, just from an officer safety standpoint alone, support this bill. And also the reduction on the burden on local law enforcement. And just give the officers the tools and the badges to do their job. Ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I ask for grace from the bill sponsors. I was hoping to speak before their last word, so excuse me for that. I am standing in opposition to this bill. In previous years, we heard different iterations of this come through judiciary, and each time the bill had been struck down. Specifically, I think it's really concerning that we are asking folks who are tax collectors to come to people's doors with weapons. I believe that could create a very tense situation, make a tense situation even worse, and I don't think that's something that we want on our hands. So I stand with my colleague, whom area I forgot, so I will say, what'd you say? Highlands Ranch. My colleague in beautiful Highlands Ranch in opposition to this bill, and I hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1088. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. And 1088 is adopted. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1008.
House Bill 1008 by Representative Tipper, also Senators Fenberg and Winter, concerning the federal requirements for the implementation of fertility coverage under health benefit plans.
Okay.
Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 10008 and the Health and Insurance Committee report.
To the bill. To the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee report is the essential bill now. It was essentially a strike below. The context of this bill is that in 2020, we passed legislation in this chamber to require certain health benefit plans to cover fertility, diagnosis, treatment, and preservation services. That bill was passed with bipartisan support, was signed into law on the last day of session. It was passed the last day of session before we adjourned for the COVID pandemic in 2020. Since then, the implementation of that bill has hit a major snag, which is to say that it has not been implemented because of a way that we worded one of the amendments in the 2020 legislation. So what today's bill before you, which as I said is essentially the committee report, does is it unravels that snag, and it just clarifies that the bill can go into effect in the large group markets and in the individual and small group market should the original trigger happen, which is that the Health and Human Services Department would say that is essentially an essential health benefit. We don't anticipate, frankly, that happening anytime soon, but this just allows the original intent of the bill, which was for it to go into effect in the large group market upon passage of the bill, to come to fruition. So I already moved the report, but I don't know if my colleague has anything to add to it.
No, you did a great job of explaining.
Great.
Is there any further discussion on the Health and Insurance Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us.
Meg.
Oh, there sure is. Sorry. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question for you guys. Is there protection for those insurance groups that might have a conscientious objection to these types of treatments?
Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the original bill in 2020, which is technically existing law at 1016-104 subsection 23, we had put in an exemption for employers, a religious exemption. I assume that's what you mean by conscientious objection. So that applies to employers who would request an exemption, and the health plan would have to grant the exemption.
Further discussion, Representative Holtorf.
Excuse me, I'm going up.
I'm coming with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions for the bill sponsors. First of all, I remember the waning days of last session and how we were on a cavalry charge over the hill at Little Bighorn to get everything done that we didn't get done before the last day or two. So a lot of things happened that maybe shouldn't have happened, or we should have spent more time and deliberation doing. So with respect to this, the first thing and the first concern I have, and I'll ask my questions one at a time, with this particular bill, now is this going to cause insurance companies to raise their rates on an already overburdening and incredibly high insurance rate profile in this state? So as we now add another thing to the burden of insurance, which in this case isn't necessarily mandatory or life-threatening or major coverage, more elective coverage for fertility and fertility treatments, which we know are incredibly expensive. Is this going to affect Colorado and make it more expensive to live in Colorado in a time where we now, and Colorado knows we now have so many burdens on our pocketbook, so many requirements that we have to pay? Is this going to increase that requirement? We have more legislation that costs Colorado more money when we have to figure out how to pay all these bills in this uber inflation period in 2022.
Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Holtorf. So I wish you would have been in the committee in 2020 to hear the robust testimony. And while we did wrap session very quickly, this was not a rushed process. It was not a rushed committee hearing. There was robust testimony and a lot of work done on the bill in 2020. The answer to your question is that we asked the insurance plans to tell us what this has cost in the 18 other states that have implemented the coverage. And we did not get clear answers. What the stakeholders on our side have worked through is that when you provide individuals access to health care coverage, they make smarter decisions about their health care. So when people have to put a second mortgage on their house, or they bet the farm to get access to health care coverage, they do everything they can with the $20,000 or $30,000 that they get, and they make decisions like transferring 2 or 3 embryos. So you end up with a near universal stay in the NICU with doubles or with twins and triplets, which end up costing our healthcare system more money. But what we find is when people actually get to make appropriate health care decisions because they have health care coverage for premiums that they're paying, they don't do that. They do single transfers, which result in much healthier outcomes for both the parent and the baby. The other component is infertility affects 1 in 8, and I think that's 1 in 8 couples. It amounts to about 12% of the population. So we're talking actually about a small percent of the population, which in turn I think has a small impact. To answer your question, the only indication of an actual increased premium was estimated at perhaps $1. What that means to families, and I know that you use the word elective, this is elective in the same way that having a baby is elected, that growing your family is elective. It, for some people, is just having the diagnosis and having treatment that actually helps you have the family that you've prayed and hoped for your entire adult life. And I'll speak for myself. It was a small intervention that actually gave us the ability to become parents. And I think what's difficult is when it only affects a small percentage of the population and when it entails something that is so personal and can be embarrassing, people don't talk about it. But what happened on this bill is we actually had a lot of people come forward and tell their stories and why this was so important to them and their ability to build a family.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Tipper, for explaining that. You know, I really have a concern, and all Coloradoans have this concern. Right now, our insurance premiums, in many cases, and in mine specifically, is higher than my mortgage payment. So, as we add more burden to insurance companies, and we know that fertility treatments are incredibly expensive, even if it's for 1, 2, 10% of the population. And we also know that if you have hiccups in fertility, that you do get multiple children. In many cases, that does even further burden the medical system, your hospitals, your OBGYN centers, the parents. I've even heard stories that when we do fertility treatments, we might have 4, 6, or up to 8 children, which was not the original intent of the fertility treatments. Now think of the associated cost and burden. And those families that have that, they can't even support all those children. And they have to ask for support from outside sources because there's so many kids in the home. It's very difficult for a family with 8 children in one conception, along with other children. So this is a challenge. I'm really concerned about the fact that insurance premiums are higher in many cases than mortgage payments, and I'm really concerned that as we move forward with this elective type coverage, that insurance companies, working with their actuaries, working with their underwriters, will spread this cost among everybody else. And we will be, the citizens of Colorado, will be the ultimate bill payers as that insurance company has to cover the incredibly high cost of fertility treatments. That burden does not become the burden of the individual or the family. That burden becomes the individual, or the burden rather, of all of the people that now are paying for insurance, because insurance companies will surely spread these costs out, most assuredly spread these costs out, and have every premium payer pay. But if I am wrong, I'd like for you to explain that to me in incredible detail, because I see my insurance premiums going up and up and up every year, not only in my business, but personally. And frankly, I think Colorado is tired of the inflationary forces and the policies that are bringing inflationary pressure on every category of living in Colorado. And I speak for people in eastern Colorado. In fact, I believe I'm speaking for all of Colorado right now. And I think the newspaper article on Friday highlighted that to great extent.
Representative Tipper?
Do you mind if I jump in?
Soper?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Representative Holtorf. So I just want to address a couple of the concerns that you raised. This is perhaps a lot more nuanced than what you were just illustrating. First of all, to the issue of families who are having multiple kids through the IVF process. Right now, it's a very expensive process. And so you'll have families that are engaging in, and perhaps on the technicalities, Representative Tipper can help me out here, but they'll have more of the, is it the gametes placed in, and it results then in the higher fertility rate. Well, it's very expensive, and it's very worrisome if you're a doctor overseeing this. So it's really important, if we do have coverage for IVF treatments, that we don't have someone who sees it as being so expensive that they're going to throw everything at the wall on that first try. That's to answer that particular point. The other point you raised is, where is this limited to? As we heard in committee both this year and last year, and a follow-up with our researchers, only a max of 12% of Coloradans have medical infertility. So already that limits the pool of Coloradans that would be eligible for this. Not all 12% of Coloradans would be engaging in IVF treatment. Furthermore, I think it's very difficult to tell someone who wants to have a family, particularly a soldier who is serving our great nation and our great state, that they can't have a family because of certain infertility, whether it was in combat or other reasons that are medically related. So that answers that particular question. On the question of will this make our health insurance plans go up, the evidence is inconclusive. In 2020, when this bill was first brought, I asked that of the insurance companies in committee, and the answer I got was they couldn't determine if it would cause insurance rates to go up or not, because in other states that have done this, we did not actually see any sort of a rate that could be noticed. There's many other things that are in health insurance that does cause medical inflation. There's, I hate to say it, but a lot of elective surgeries when it comes to hips, knees, and other joints that patients want to have done at very expensive clinics that definitely will rise the cost. This is really about families that want to have a family, have kids. And that answers your points.
Representative Chipper? Representative Pico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a little surprising to hear that the insurance rate isn't going to go up, that this isn't going to cost the people who pay their insurance rates. Every dollar that the insurance companies has comes out of the rates. They may not go up very much, they may go up a lot, but they're definitely coming out of the pockets of everybody else. So let's make sure that that's clear. I don't think this is a good bill, and I ask it, I know.
Representative Chipper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll say that as Representative Soper said, it is inconclusive, and like I said, in the 18 other states, this has been implemented in some shape or form. We have not seen increases in premiums, and certainly the insurance companies that operate in this state have not pointed to hikes in other states. In fact, like I said, we've actually had insurance companies come on board with follow-up legislation because it has had a positive effect overall. In my conversations and stakeholding on this bill, first of all, the insurance companies are in a neutral position on this bill. They're not opposed to the bill. One of the insurance companies actually told us that they did rate setting in the large market and it did not affect the rate. So it does depend on the plan, but it is the case, just as Representative Soper said, that at best it's inconclusive, or excuse me, at worst it's inconclusive, and at best it's actually cost savings. And I will clarify, Representative Holtorf, you do not speak for me. I speak on behalf of myself and I speak on behalf of my constituents. I suspect that your knowledge related to fertility is confined to the pages of People magazine. Octomom does not reflect the reality of what infertility diagnosis and treatment is. And what we were trying to say is that when individuals do not get insurance coverage, Representative Holtorf, you spoke about individuals that have 8 children. I hope that you are not saying that individuals that have 8 children
Representative
regret having
Chipper,
8
let's
children.
go to the committee report. Let's stick to the committee
I
report.
asked for a yes vote.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the esteemed words of our leader, the Speaker of the House, we are working on professionalism, and I am not calling any individual out by name, and I'm not inferring anybody or any other thing in People magazine. Okay, I don't know where that came from. It came from you, but I'm not going to call that out. I don't want to go there. I want to talk to the issues. And here's the issue. Insurance companies are neutral. Well, naturally, they would be neutral if their premiums can go up and they can increase the burden that they will put on the premium payer base as they pick up another insurance coverage obligation. Now, of course, it's inconclusive because it hasn't been fully analyzed. And I would even argue that if it is inconclusive and we don't know here in Colorado, maybe we should spend some more time and do some study that determines what those costs are to Colorado. But here's the problem I have with this particular bill. And it has nothing to do with the desire for families to have children. Please understand me in this chamber. It has everything to do with the fact that it's getting more and more expensive to live in this state. And we continue to pass policies that may, perhaps, or will, if you apply a little bit of common sense and know how expensive these treatments are. And we've already heard that you have to have perhaps multiple treatments because the first one may not be successful. So who carries that burden if the first treatment doesn't work and you have to have another treatment and another treatment or a third or fourth or fifth treatment? And these treatments cost tens of thousands of dollars and probably more. I speculate. But these are incredibly expensive. They're an incredible burden on the medical community. And I will tell you that the people in eastern Colorado cry out and say, why is it getting so expensive for me to survive? Why is it getting so expensive to make a living in this state and stay above what we call the waterline in the Navy? For my Navy brethren, you want to stay above the waterline. And when you can't stay above the waterline, all of a sudden your boat starts to sink. Now, I will repeat again, health insurance premiums for many people are greater than your mortgage payments. Maybe not perhaps in urban Colorado, where you have $500, $600, $800 million homes because of the inflationary rates of housing costs. But in rural Colorado, where I live, this is a reality. You want to talk about the rural-urban divide? I am telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this is real for us. And insurance premiums will go up. It's common sense. Somebody's got to bear the burden of these costs. Colorado knows, and the citizens of Colorado know, someone's got to pay for this. There's no free lunch out there. Someone's going to carry this pail of water in Colorado when you pass this type of legislation and burden insurance companies with this type of legislation that now they have to implement. I wasn't for this last year. I'm equally and stand before you again to tell you I'm just as opposed now as I was then, and this problem is even worse. And I will tell you why the problem is worse. Because it's getting more and more expensive to make a living in Colorado. And these type of policies that have been going on for several years now apparently are unabated. And that is the point I want to make as we continue to march forward and don't think about Colorado and their pocketbooks. I don't need a higher premium on my insurance. What about the young people trying to start out in their lives? Do they need a higher premium? Will they get a private premium? That's the question. Common sense says this is going to cost Colorado more money. It's going to cost Colorado families more money in higher insurance premiums. And for there, I stand strongly opposed to making it more expensive anyway to live in Colorado. And every time these things come, I'm going to stand here for the little people in Colorado, in rural Colorado, that are out there that cannot afford another dollar, $1, which I question. $1, well, if you think about the population of Colorado and everybody pays $1 more, that's a lot of money. Millions of dollars. And someone has to pick up that burden. We need to stop making it more expensive to live in Colorado. Let's begin that today. Vote no on this bill.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move Amendment L007 and ask that it be displayed.
That is a proper motion. The amendment is properly displayed. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we heard earlier from the sponsor, there is already a religious exemption in this statutory framework for employers. Employers can ask their carriers for an exemption from this particular rule, and they shall be granted that particular exemption. I would like to propose that we also allow carriers who have been created, insurance companies who have been created based off of a particular faith perspective or conscious perspective, to have a similar right to ask the division for an exemption that may be granted. If they are granted that exemption, then they would need to give notice, of course, to their customers, and presumably the market is large enough for both those who would want to provide these services and those who wouldn't to be able to operate. And then, of course, the customers themselves would self-select, and those who would be asking for that exemption under Section E as it currently stands, or E1 as in this amendment, would probably align themselves with those presumably or assumed in Section E2. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Luck. For clarification, this is Amendment L007 to the committee report. Representative Tipper.
Thank you. It's written as to the bill, but my understanding is that was a mistake. It's meant to be as to the committee report. I'll speak to it because my comments wouldn't change if that's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the intent. The exemption that we put in 2020 was reflective, I think, the general concern. My opposition, and I'd ask for a no vote on this amendment, is that we're going to sweep in a broader group of people that do not share the conscientious objection, or what was most likely going to be a religious objection of that particular health carrier. And so where we tried to strike a narrow balance was to say, religious employers can ask for an exemption, and I think that is a more tailored approach. And it's built off some assumptions, but I think some of those assumptions are, if you're working for an employer that's going to take a position like that, it's more than likely that your values align with that employer, where I think that's less likely the case when we're talking about carriers. The other consideration here is, and I know that we had spoken about this offline, and I appreciate the discourse that we've had on this, is that there are some med-share programs which tend to be not just religiously affiliated, but I think founded in religious principles. Those are not regulated by the Division of Insurance currently, and I know that there have been efforts to bring Medi-Share under DOI, but even if that's the case, they're not treated, they're not viewed, and they don't hold themselves out, or they don't want to be treated as insurance products. They're not. So this bill covers health benefit plans, insurance plans that are regulated by Colorado DOI. So I think even moving into the world of hypotheticals, this current law that's not been enacted but for this legislation is not going to affect that group of individuals. And so I respectfully ask for a no vote.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to withdraw my original motion and then move to have L0. Okay. I'm going to pause and withdraw the withdrawal and let someone else until it's printed, if that's all right.
Okay. So we're on hold for a moment but you are withdrawing this amendment.
Reintroducing it under the committee report, not under the bill.
I can go ahead. I'll speak on the bill or the committee report.
Sorry for the confusion. I'm withdrawing this amendment. Thank you.
The amendment has been withdrawn. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I was on the committee when I heard this bill, and firstly, I want to commend the bill sponsors. One of the things that maybe some of you may not know is that me and my wife, we actually have experienced fertility issues ourselves. So this is something that hit near and dear to my heart. Ultimately, I was a no, but I just want to say that I think the work that's being done here is something that's to be commended. This is not an easy issue. It's certainly not something that is without emotion.
especially as someone who's dealt with this personally, and I know there are others in this chamber that have as well. And so when we talk about this particular topic, I just want to encourage all the members to realize that this is something worth talking about. This is something worth tackling and trying to find a resolution to. And so while I certainly understand the comments that have been made on from members on this side of the aisle, I do want to encourage everyone to understand that this is coming from a good place, and this is certainly not something that's going to, I think, break the bank if it does pass. Ultimately, I think where it's at right now, I cannot support. But when we look at the grand scheme of things, I do want to let everyone know that this is something that's deeply, it's something that I deeply care about. And if there is a way that I can come on board, through the deliberative process that we're doing here, then I want to say yes to this. But it's just not a place for me where I am personally. But with that said, I think when we're talking about insurance and cost of living and whatnot, this isn't really that debate. This is something else. So with that, members, I just ask that you for the committee report and the bill itself, you vote your conscience. So thank you.
We are on the committee report. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am back again with the same amendment. However, this time it's L008 and it's to the committee report, not to the bill. So I would like to move it and ask that it be displayed.
That amendment is properly displayed and properly moved. Representative Luck.
So I appreciate the sponsor's response and the conversation around this and the addition to the legislative record that this isn't supposed to impact those groups like MediShare. I am still concerned, though, having not fully researched to see if there are actual insurance companies that would be covered, that we provide this opportunity, because there may be those groups who do have their whole insurance company that is similar to the health plans that you're talking about and contemplating, but that is grounded in some sort of religious principle. And so I would still submit this for consideration. I don't think it is going to strike at the heart of what you're trying to do. I think the vast majority of the companies won't fall within this exemption, and it's a may, not a shall, right? So the division would have some review of that. But I do think it's important to honor those with that perspective who want to get into that particular market.
Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the reasons I discussed, I do ask for a no vote on the amendment. I will say that in the course of your research, and I'm willing to work with you on this, if we do identify a carrier that only serves a particular, religious or otherwise moral conviction, that I would certainly entertain an amendment that we could work on for thirds. And I do just want to say, because we've been talking about this in terms of religion, I don't want the takeaway to be that there is religious opposition to fertility treatment. That is not universally the case. Sure, I'm sure there are some organizations that do disapprove, but I can tell you from personal experience, I'm a Christian myself, and I have sat next to many weeping Christians I believe Catholics are Christians, but individuals wearing crucifixes, and this is an issue that affects the broad population regardless of religious affiliation. I just wanted to make that clear, that I wasn't endorsing the viewpoint that certain religious organizations universally oppose this.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It may not be a universally held religious beliefs, but there are certainly, and within the Catholic Church is very definitely has objections to this sort of stuff. That is, in fact, part of the issue. So I ask that this amendment be approved and allow a religious exemption, though there may not be an insurance company now, there may be in the future, one never knows, and they should have that option.
Further discussion on the amendment. The question before us is Amendment L008 to Health and Insurance Committee Report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The amendment is lost. To the committee report. The question before us is the passage of the Health and Insurance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The report passes. To the bill, Representative Soper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not often that you get to quote a British case in the Colorado House of Representatives, but today seems like a very special day. It's Valentine's, why not? In McFarland against Tayside, the quote from this case is very pertinent to this bill. While the fact pattern may be quite different, the quote goes, "It is a matter of universally shared emotion and sentiment that the intangible but all-important, incalculable but invaluable benefits of parenthood far outweigh mere monetary burdens involved." On a more practical level, the validity of the principle may be tested by simply asking any parent what the purchase price of their child should be. Since this is the rule of experience, it should be that we therefore hold that this is the appropriate rule of law. When I first heard this quote, I was a law student in Scotland, and it stood out to me. And when I first heard this bill in 2020, and then the correction just a few days ago in our Health and Insurance Committee, it brought back this case to me, and it was a reminder that when someone is fighting for life, when someone is fighting to start a family, when a couple wants to be able to have that legacy, to be able to instill the values that they love and share on the next generation, that's what we ought to be fighting for. This is the future of Colorado. These are parents who want to ensure that they have a family and that their family is the future of Colorado. As I said earlier, only a maximum of 12% of Colorado's population, and this is held steady, would have medical infertility. Some of these Coloradans served our great state and nation in the military. Others, through no choice of their own, had this particular medical issue. For those who say that it should not be covered in our health insurance plans because getting pregnant is an elective decision, I would push back and say, what about hip replacements or knee replacements? Are those not covered by health insurance plans, and would those not be considered electives? When our state was shut down during the pandemic and all elective procedures were canceled, what were the first things to go? Things like knees and hips. But does it improve the value of life? As someone who's experienced a hip replacement at an unfortunate young age, I will say absolutely. And am I thankful that it was covered? The answer is yes. It's the same when we're talking about individuals who are wanting to create life and to have a family. I salute anyone who wants to bring a newborn child into this world. This may not be the ideal world to bring a newborn into. Pandemics, threats of war, financial instability, and the fact that every single year a new report comes out saying how expensive a single child is. But yet, every single day, we have Coloradans who want to create a family, who want to do better for our state and nation, and who want to instill the values that they love onto their kids. Members, I would urge a yes vote on this bill, and I would not be joining if I wasn't fully in support of this bill. Let's make Colorado the 19th state here. I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative from Delta County. I got that one right? Yeah, okay, good. For your support of this bill. Members, we have already debated this bill. Many of you all know it was introduced and passed in previous legislative sessions. We just have some work on implementation, and that's what Representative Tipper is doing here today. While I appreciate folks wanting to rehash the issue, I do believe we had a very robust debate on this particular measure. And what it comes down to is the fact that fertility treatment should be covered by insurance. If you have insurance, your medical bills should be paid for. Of course, within your plan, with deductibles, we're not asking for anything special, but what we are asking for is that you have fertility treatment covered. This is so important for many people, as we heard from folks on both sides of the aisle, both men and women who have struggled with this. We understand how important this is when we decide to build our families. This is something that can really make Colorado a more desirable place to be when folks know that they can start their family here, and if they get into any hiccups, that their insurance will cover the medical treatment that they need. This is medical treatment. This is all we're asking for in this bill. I appreciate my colleagues who have come down to testify on this bill, and those who will come, who have been personally impacted by the lack of laws in this area. If folks haven't heard from friends, colleagues, family members who have had to go through fertility treatment, it is obscenely expensive. And when you have good insurance coverage, which is a privilege, to then find out that your fertility treatment and starting a family is beyond your reach is devastating. It's devastating. And I'm just going to be honest with you. The reason why it's there, the reason why these policies are there, are because of bias that has been built into the system for years. For years. And as we stand and say that we are an equal and just and fair society, one part of that is ensuring that when we see things in the books that we know are biased against a certain type of person, that we remove them. And thank you. Thank you. And when we talk about fertility treatment, that is what we're doing here. That is what we're saying here. You know, my mom is an OBGYN. She retired as a OBGYN in the military after 30 years of service. And I will tell you, when fertility treatment isn't covered, people seek out less healthy options. And that is also detrimental. So what we are asking for is to bring a little bit of equity into our insurance coverage. That's it. And to remove the barriers for families who need this important medical treatment. I asked for an aye vote on this bill, and I have to commend the bill sponsor, Representative Tipper, for your relentless advocacy on this issue. We've talked in the summer about this, and you are not going to let it go. You know, you want to make sure this coverage is available to the families who have really opened their hearts to you about their personal struggles. This is how policy is made and should be made. It's directly responsive to our constituents in Colorado who need this coverage. So thank you, Representative Tipper. I urge a yes vote on the bill.
Representative Malika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to start off where the last representative did, as giving huge kudos to the sponsor of this bill and the work that she did. I've sat through committee twice now listening to this bill, and heartbreaking and heartwarming testimony, watching her become a mother, and I just want to really give a big shout out for the work that you've done, Representative Tipper. Also to the representative from Delta County, for the words that you shared, because I think they're very relevant, and you shared those words in committee. But I want to address some things that we've heard at the well today. And it's something that we continuously hear in this well, and it's this rural-urban divide, and that the urban legislators don't think about the rural legislators, which is something that I can't disagree with more. Let's bring up reinsurance. Let's look at reinsurance, a policy that we passed. A policy that has lowered the cost of premiums by almost 30% in our rural communities. So I don't understand this concept that we're not thinking about the rural areas. And I don't understand this concept that there's not rural constituents or rural members of this state who are also facing fertility issues, who are also struggling to start a family. This isn't just a problem that we face in the Denver metro area. This is a problem that we face all over the state. And I think that that's what we have to focus on, that this is not just an urban issue. This is an issue that we're trying to solve for the entire state. And I just want to make it clear, too, that when we think about healthcare, and the representative from Delta County made a great point that we do a great job at replacing hips, and we do a great job at replacing knees, we do a bad job in this area, members, in this state. Fertility healthcare is healthcare. God forbid if anyone in this room has to go through the things that some of the stories that we heard in committee. God forbid. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to stop that, and we're trying to make sure that the people of Colorado are taken care of, and that if you want to start a family in this state, that you have that ability, no matter where you live. And so I strongly give the sponsor kudos again. I ask for a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Hooton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I would like to hear from those opposed to this bill why they think it's justified that health insurance coverage allows for coverage of Viagra, but not for fertility treatment. I would really like to hear from the opposition about how you believe that should be justified, but fertility treatment not. Thank you.
Representative Escar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand in strong support of this bill. I was in strong support of the original bill. Let's get this completely clear. The debate that's happened so far on the committee report was really about the language that was in the original bill that has passed and is now law. This bill is just making sure that that law is actually implemented as intended. I too can't thank the sponsors enough for not only this bill to make sure we can get moving on the amazing law that we passed last year, to get this moving so families across the state, including rural Colorado, where part of my family's from, and many of you know, I had to go through IVF as well. My wife is from a little tiny town called Deer Trail. That's pretty rural in Colorado. Folks across the state are literally trying to deal with these issues of infertility. I spent my life dealing with endometriosis. I was told from a very young age, the only way that I was going to have a family is I better open a savings account because I was going to have to do IVF. And that takes a lot of money, that or I should just pray. Those were both those pieces of advice came from a doctor. I started a savings account. And I'm proud to say I had to wipe that out, and now I have Marlo. I shouldn't have to wipe out a savings account to start a family and have the family that I've always wanted to have, a family that I love beyond anything else in this world. It's an amazing privilege to have been able to save since I was 21 years old for that child. Not everybody has that privilege, and that should not stop them from being able to create the family that they know and they love and they've wanted for years. Thank you again for bringing this bill forward to make sure the law that we already passed is implemented the way it was meant to.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Any further discussion on House Bill 1008?
Microphone's off.
Having problems with it, sorry.
Any further discussion on House Bill 1008?
It's still off.
Some fertility issues on the microphone. Sorry. Any further discussion on House Bill 1008? Seeing none, the question is the adoption of House Bill 1008 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1008 as amended is passed. Mr. Shebo please read House Bill 1089? Oh, I'm sorry, Majority Leader Eskar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I'm a little short. I'll figure out how to flag the chairs down a little better next time. I move to lay over House Bill 1089 until tomorrow, February 15th.
That will be laid over. And now House Bill 1046, Majority Leader Eskar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1046 until tomorrow, February 15th.
Thank you. Mr. Shebo, please read House Bill 1074.
House Bill 1074 by Representative Amabile, also Senator Heisey, concerning certain traffic violations on the Interstate 70 peak period shoulder lanes.
Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I move House Bill 1074 on second reading. There are no committee reports.
Thank you. To the bill.
Okay, so this bill was brought to me by the Department of Transportation, and it is regarding the managed lanes on I-70 that run through Clear Creek County. Right now, that lane is only allowed to be open, and this is by the Federal Transportation Department, only allows us to have those managed lanes open 100 days a year. And so when they're closed, there's not a physical barrier that closes them off. And people drive in those lanes when they're closed, and that creates a hazard. And people in Clear Creek County, which I represent, are concerned that there will be there is the potential, a very likely potential for major accidents to happen as a result of people driving through that lane when it's closed. There is currently a $250 fine for driving in the lane, but it's very hard for the police for the State Patrol to police that area because it's so narrow and there are no shoulders. So it's very hard for them to pull people over. And all the bill does is it allows them to fine $250 for driving in the lane when it's closed using the automatic equipment that they already have in place. So instead of sending you the toll for driving in the road, they take a picture of your license plate and they send you the ticket, $250. I asked for an aye vote. It's a good bill that will keep people in Clear Creek County particularly safe. Thank you.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have long been opposed to toll lanes anyway, but in this case, you've got the 3 lanes there. The federal government only allows us to have a toll lane for part of the period of time. A very simple solution is restripe the concrete and just do away with the toll lanes and just have the lanes. That is an issue that we've had and been fighting for Interstate 25 coming up Colorado Springs. We'll continue to have the fight, and I'll continue to oppose toll lanes, period. Thank you.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the problem with those I-70 lanes is that they are closed so often. And I know that's the federal government that is enforcing those rules, but those are frankly silly rules. The number of times that and probably many of the people in this body have been sitting in a traffic jam just at a dead stop, and there's this lane just wide open there that is closed for some reason. It doesn't make common sense. And what I know the local governments are arguing is that it's not a lane, it's a shoulder that can be used as a lane versus a lane that can sometimes be used as a shoulder. The people of Colorado don't think of it. The people of Colorado think of it as a lane because so much went into it, and it's been something the people of Colorado have been waiting for so long for that now the lane is open, but they can't ever drive in it even though there is a traffic jam that is clogging up the road. And so I oppose the bill because I think we simply need to work with our federal partners at the federal level to get rid of that silly 100-day rule because that just doesn't make any sense. The people of Colorado, the taxpayers of Colorado, worked very hard to get that third lane put in, and now the federal government is saying that we can't use it. The crime of toll evasion already exists, it already can be enforced. This is a bill to simply automate the process and mail tickets to a lot of new people. So I ask for a no vote.
Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve here with you.
And it's an honor to serve with you.
So I guess I get the 100 days. And yes, we probably ought to work with our federal contingent to say, can we waive that? Certainly because I-70 traffic is a big problem. Here's my struggle. It is not just traffic jams, but it is when there are accidents that are blocking multiple lanes of a highway, and then in order to use that lane only for a brief period, not one of the 100 days, but for that brief period to make sure traffic can go around it, I guess first I would ask a question, and then I'll just follow up with an if this is your answer statement. Number one, can people use it in those emergent circumstances? And number two, if they do use it in those emergent circumstances, is it only for a certain length? And if they use it for any more than that, then would they be subject to this fine?
Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll just address the issues that came up. First of all, the road is too narrow to turn it into 3 regular lanes, and that would be an extremely dangerous situation to have 3 lanes. Semi-trucks and other trucks, multiple axle vehicles are not allowed in the lane at all because there's just no room for them. So when you say, well, they're wide open, the operative word here is wide. They're not wide open, they're narrow. And they're narrow closed a lot of the time because they do not meet the standard for a lane. And then can you use that when it's closed as an emergency pull-off place or to get around an emergency? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. And that is part of why they want to be able to encourage people not to drive in the lane, because if I'm driving along and I have a flat tire, I know the lane is closed, I pull over to change my tire because now it's a shoulder, and somebody comes up from behind who's going 70 miles an hour, and they don't see me until they come around the corner, and then I'm dead because I pulled over there with a flat tire. So the whole purpose of, one of the purposes of this is so that people can actually use it as an emergency pull-off place as you would any shoulder when it's closed. So again, thank you.
Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Representative Amabile, thank you very much for that description. How do they know? How do they know whether or not you have pulled into that lane to get around an obstruction or something else? And therefore, you know, we've had the same kind of conversation when we've seen the red light cameras and the portable cameras that the city of Denver, the city of Fort Collins have used. And certainly, one, it's raised some very significant constitutional questions, but the how do they know piece of that, I remember driving the full length of the country of Norway, and they have tons of traffic cameras. And I thought, you know, if you wanted to make like a picture flip book, you could just make sure you were speeding past every one of those cameras with a slightly different posture, and just take your pictures from the police department, make them into a little book. However, the problem is that camera never knows. That camera never knows what the exigent circumstance was that you encountered on the road. So how do they know?
Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So they know because they know if you only stopped in one spot. But if they see your car go past several spots, then they know that you didn't just pull over in one area. And if they have a day when there's an accident, they know that too. And then they can allow for that when they do the fines. And they do actually do that. And they do that with the tolling too. So, and the other thing is people are asking, would you get multiple $250 tickets? And the answer to that is also no. If you drove the entire length of the managed lane, you would get one ticket for $250.
Representative Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. Did you present some of that information in committee? And since I wasn't on that committee, so did you also make sure that we know exactly how they know, and do they inform drivers there's an accident ahead and now the toll lane is open? That's my last question. I really appreciate it because this is an interesting issue that comes up a lot, both North I-25, South I-25, and I-70.
Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They do have the ability to change the messaging on the entrance, the overhead signage. I don't know whether they open the lane on the fly when there's an accident, but they do have the ability to not ticket you for doing it when they know that there was a big backup on the highway.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate that the width of the roadway isn't optimum, but managed lanes come in a lot of different varieties. Coming up the brand new I-25 gap, which doesn't quite catch the right level of quality control one would hope for a new lane, but significant portions of that doesn't have a shoulder on the left side as you rocket along in there. And that kind of sounds like the same thing in I-70. I maintain that you can still restripe the roadway. A managed lane comes in a lot of different varieties. When I sat through a presentation from CDOT, they covered over 50 different types of managed lanes, and one of them can be trucks and buses and so forth. Large vehicles don't go in the left lane. There are possibilities to do that. If you have the lanes open, 3 lanes open for any period of time, obviously, you can do it all the time, and that is kind of my point. We're overcharging our citizens, and I'm opposed to toll lanes just on principle. But in this case, I think we can work that through without having that. And yes, Leader McKean, she did answer every question in committee.
Representative Amabile.
Thank you for that input, and certainly the people in Clear Creek and the experts are agreed that it is a dangerous situation to have that lane open all the time. I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion on House Bill 1074? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1074. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1074 is passed. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the House rise and report.
Seeing no objections, the committee will rise and report.
Mr. Shebel, please, oh wait, the House will come back to order. Mr. Shebel, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof and making the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1008 as amended, House Bills 1074 and 1088 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bills 1046 and 1089 laid over until February 15th, 2022.
Representative Froelich. Members, you have heard the motion. There are no amendments at the desk. The question before us is the adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Shee will please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Hanks, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Hanks votes no. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Baisley, Burnett, Gray, Kennedy, Mollica. Gray is excused. Baisley is excused. Please close machine. With 39 aye votes, 21 no votes, and 5 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. The next order of business is consideration of resolution. Mr. Shee will please read the title of the House Joint Resolution 1002.
House Joint Resolution 1002 by Representatives Pico and Rich, also Senators Heisey and Zenzinger, concerning a request that Congress allow the state of Colorado to conduct an analysis and possibly move forward on harmonizing the gross vehicle weight for trucks on the interstate highway system in Colorado with that of other state highways.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, where to go? House Joint Resolution 22-1002.
So moved. Any further discussion? Representative Pico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that it be read in length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Shebel.
Whereas trucking and truck drivers have been essential during the COVID-19 pandemic in delivering critical goods such as food, fuel, medical supplies, and much more. And whereas trucking is critical in the movement of goods and products for agriculture, ranchers, manufacturers, grocers, and fuel suppliers, with over 80% of the manufactured products in Colorado being moved by truck. And whereas 79% of the communities in Colorado are served solely by truck for their freight needs. And whereas the state's and nation's supply chains have been greatly stressed due to a range of issues that include a truck driver shortage, which is anticipated to continue into the future, along with increasing freight demands for our growing state that have led to shortages, delays, and higher prices for the movement of goods within the state. And whereas for over 40 years, Colorado state law has authorized a maximum gross vehicle weight of 85,000 pounds for all state highways, with the only exception being the state highway system.
Mr. Shebel, Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Instead of having the whole thing, let me summarize it very quickly. Please have your seats. It is a weighty subject, but I think...
We waited all day.
Currently, there is a mismatch between state highways and the federal freeway system. There's a 5,000-pound difference between the trucks, what they can carry. This is an issue that has impacted the trucker industry's abilities to move freight. They can't, at the full load, use a federal on the, and if they do use a federal, weight limit of 80,000 pounds, then they can't maximize their own lift and they have to, over time, carry more trucks. So this resolution requests the Congress to investigate this and align this.
Representative Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Governor Polis approved a temporary waiver of that 5,000-pound discrepancy during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this study that we're asking the Congress to do will take a wide range of factors into consideration to determine if that change should be made permanent. Increasing the interstate highway system maximum gross weight to match that of Colorado state law will help to alleviate the supply chain issues, decrease the number of semi-trucks on the road, and decrease emissions. We're asking for an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative Rich. Representative Pico.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to emphasize, this was heard in the interim during the Transportation Committee. It has support across the aisle, and we ask for an aye vote.
Great. Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had a very good conversation about this resolution in House Transportation and Local Government. It's merely a request to Congress to let the study issue go through, and Congress still has to say yay or nay. So it's a good resolution. Vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Exum. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also rise in support of this resolution. As many of you know, my dad was a semi-truck driver and drove agricultural products from western Colorado in the form of Olathe sweet corn and Palisade peaches to Denver every single day and back. And this was actually something that they encountered quite a bit as they were calculating the weight and having to weigh, and it could easily get our truck drivers in trouble if they didn't weigh themselves constantly. So if we could align it, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Soper. Is there any further discussion on House Joint Resolution 1002? Seeing none, is there objection to a voice vote? Seeing no objection, the question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1002. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1002 is adopted. Is there objection to, should we just open it up? What do you want to do?
Mr. Speaker, if there's no objection, I ask the roll call be added as co-sponsors.
See no, I think it's a motion. Will you move that?
Mr. Speaker, I move that, I make that motion.
Great. The motion before us. It's great. It's okay. No worries. The motion before us. See no objection. The current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. That brings us back to announcements and introductions. Representative Neville, Pelton, Representative Cutter. Yeah, go ahead.
That's right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to let everyone know that today is Random Act of Kindness, beginning of Random Acts of Kindness Week. And, right, we talk a lot about being kind, and I think it's something that all of us can do in simple ways every day. You don't have to agree with someone. You don't even have to like someone to be kind to them. Random Act of Kindness is an organization, a foundation that's been around in Colorado for a number of years, and this is what they say: the work to create a kinder world never ends. There is no limit on the amount of goodness we can put into the world, but we need your help. So you can check out their website, Random Act of Kindness Foundation, and they have all kinds of tools. They have a contest for kids this week, all kinds of educational tools for classrooms and for families. And so I encourage you to take a look and support them. They also will send out daily texts if you sign up, and you get a lovely text reminding you of something, you know, just spreading kindness. So happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Representative Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm requesting permission to be excused this Friday the 18th.
So approved. Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess this kind of goes along with what Representative Tipper said. Tomorrow morning, Pastor Dan Files is going to be down doing our weekly Bible study. We're in 1 John, talking about loving everybody and doing our job. So come on down, feed your belly and feed your soul.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sweet Inspirations out of La Junta, as well as all of House District 47, wanted to wish you a happy Valentine's Day, but I didn't get here in time to actually get these on your desk, so I will try to get that done before the end of the day. Happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's still chocolates on my desk, FYI. With that, I move that the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.